If you love being part of the Rapaholics tribe, please consider smashing that like and hitting subscribe. Now, Lobries and Gentlegrams, we got an interesting one, okay? Because ever since Kung Fu Kenny Lamar called the cultural cosplayer Champagne Petition Poppy a prom queen predator and a sexy red spiraling stunt double, he has officially dethroned Drake from the one thing that defamation Drake has always prided himself on having the upper hand in, and that's the numbers. Even after being exposed for having a ghostwriter in his battle with Meek Mill, he still emerged on top, #1 for the next decade. Pusha T astoundingly asked him to acknowledge Adonis, and Drake still emerged victorious after that on the charts, with the Sexy Red Stunt Double's 7th album, Scorpion, scoring 3 #1 hits. It seemed like no L in no rap battle could ever take Drake off of the charts, but Kendrick Lamar might have just done it. Now, that's not to say Drake still won't put up great numbers, but if you've noticed, ever since Not Like Us dropped, the sales of the spiraling Sexy Red Stunt Double suing sensitive sad boy have slumped, to say the least, while Kendrick Lamar continues rising up the charts, signifying a shift within hip-hop where we might actually start valuing real artistry and lyricism on the charts. After the Super Bowl halftime show, Kendrick has experienced a surge in sales that we haven't seen in history for a rapper, breaking countless records that we're going to touch on in this video. But if you guys have been keeping up, then you've probably noticed the pattern of every time Kendrick has a big accomplishment, Drake tries to come in and rain on the petition parade. Kung Fu Kenny does the pop out and the Not Like Us music video. The Champagne Petition Prom Queen Poppy drops 100 gigs of behind the scenes footage and multiple unreleased songs. The Boogeyman bounces back with an announcement of his Super Bowl halftime performance. The belligerent balding bearded bully hops on a gambling live stream with XQC, disses all his fragile ops, and announces a tour in Australia and a new album with Party Next Door. The Good Kid Mad City gives us some grand national excellence with his latest album GNX, and the Sexy Red Stunt Double then emerges into his final form as Lawbreed Defamation Drizzy Courthouse Karen Champagne Petition Poppy, filing his lawsuit against UMG on the same week that GNX is released. Then Kendrick wins a bunch of Grammys for Not Like Us and goes on to perform it on the Super Bowl stage, and of course, Lawbreed announces the release date of his Party Next Door album being the week right after the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not sure if he did this to take attention away from Kendrick's victory lap. Maybe it was in protest against UMG since it doesn't fulfill his contract as it's not a solo album, or maybe he thought that he was such a dominant force on the charts that his new album would take all the spotlight off Kendrick Lamar and his sales would destroy Kendrick's, showing us that no lawsuit, no rap battle, no crash out at an NBA game can stop Drake from being the best-selling rapper in the game. But unfortunately for Drake, that is utterly false, and of course, all the OV hoes have swooped in due to the poor performance of his latest release to chalk up the weak sales to conspiracies about him being blackballed. They think Spotify is hiding his music in retaliation for Drake suing them and UMG and threatening the future of rap battles. And we're going to break that all down and debunk why that is utter BS and why Drake has no case in this lawsuit and why diss songs will never be able to be taken into a court of law. So the only thing phonier than Drake's claims of Not Like Us destroying his reputation is his fake phony Montana mob boss persona, because yes, while Not Like Us definitely did irreparable damage to Drake standing within hip-hop, he's still a global pop star. His name is too big to fail on a global scale. And you could see that when the first day numbers came in for his new album with him and Party Next Door. On Spotify, all the songs got above 1 million streams in its first day of release, with the intro track CN Tower getting the most streams at 4.6 million. Then you had his Joe Budden diss track Gimme a Hug, where he's talking about if Kendrick had his wish and Drake was actually eliminated, then all the girls at the strip club would be twerking to Kendrick songs with a dictionary to try to understand his quintuple entendres. That song, which was probably a highlight on the album, it's called Gimme a Hug, that garnered 4 million streams, and you could see all the songs performed decently well enough to rebuttal his claims about his career suffering irreversible damage from Not Like Us. But when you look at it on a larger scale, this was actually a massive flop for Drake. Yeah, you could say, oh, it was a collab tape with Party Next Door, it was an R&B project. You can make whatever excuse you want, but this is Drake we're talking about, right? The king of the charts. And if you look at the biggest single day streams for albums by rappers on Spotify so far this decade, so albums that had the biggest one-day streaming numbers, you could see that his new album, Some Sexy Sleepy Songs for You, only got 56 million streams in its first day, and that's way down the list of the biggest albums this decade. The Defamation Champagne Petition Poppies own album, Certified Lawyer Boy, stands at the top of this list, racking up 153 million streams in its first day of release. Then you had Travis Scott's Utopia at 129 million streams. Then again, Drake's own album For All the Dogs with 109 million streams. Then Kanye's album Donda. Then Kendrick's album Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Then again, Drake with Her Loss. Chromacopia with 85 million streams. Now, this is unique because Tyler released his album in the middle of the day, so it got 85 million streams without tracking those full 24 hours. Kendrick also released GNX in the middle of the day, so they only counted his second day as his full first 24 hours, so GNX got 74 million streams in that first full 24-hour window, but that's not counting the 6-7 hours that it was released on the day prior. Even Drake's most experimental album to date, Honestly Nevermind, which was basically a full-on dance album, still racked up more streams than his latest album with 61 million streams in the first day. And even Kanye's independent release, Vultures 1 with Ty Dolla $ign, after he was cancelled, blackballed. Not this phony blackballing that Phony Montana is claiming is happening to him with this new album. Kanye was really shunned from the industry, had to release this independently. The album got taken down from Spotify in its first day, had to get re-uploaded. It was an absolute mess. But even with all that controversy, he was still able to get more streams than Drake's new album in its first day of release, as Vultures 1 got 58 million streams in its first day, and Some Sexy Songs for You only got 56 million. And you could see here that this is Drake's lowest first day streaming numbers since way back in 2016 with Views. And you got to remember, right? Streaming was a fraction of what it is today. So obviously the streaming numbers wouldn't have been nearly as high in 2016 as they are in 2025. So Views got 37 million streams. Some Sexy Songs for You is the second lowest streaming day that Drake has ever had with 56 million streams. Even More Life, which was released when streaming still wasn't this massive thing that it is today, it still streamed more in its first day than this new album with 61 million streams. And then, you know, you want to make the excuse, oh, this is a collab album. Well, his collab with 21 Savage, Her Loss, garnered 98 million streams in its first day of release. So say Kendrick made a dent in the defamation detonator would be a deep understatement. And shout out to Hip Hop All Day for providing all these stats on Twitter. Awesome account, definitely check them out. But they even responded to a fan who said, you know, how much did GNX get streamed in its first day? They said 74 million, and then someone replied saying that was its second day, and they cleared up again that was its first full 24-hour day. Its opening day only had around 7 hours tracking because Kendrick released it in the middle of the day on a Friday instead of releasing it at midnight, which most albums are typically released on. And then you could see some great poetic justice, no pun intended, as Drake and Party's new album made a splash on the Apple Music charts. However, they were unable to fill up that entire top 10 spot because there was 2 songs blocking them. Can you guess what they were? It was none other than Not Like Us and Luther with Kendrick and Drake's ex, SZA, showing that the strength of these Kendrick records is not dying up even months later. And Drake, who used to be the artist that sales were so strong they would block other artists from going number one, rappers would have to move their album release date away from whenever Drake would drop. Now you got Kendrick's Drake diss records blocking Drake from hitting the top of the charts. Did the same on Spotify, as the day that this new Drake album was released, Not Like Us by Kendrick still remained the number one most streamed song on global Spotify that day with 11.4 million streams, and Luther was at number 2 that day. At the same time, thanks to the Super Bowl and thanks to the calculated fact that Kendrick released vinyls for GNX but only shipped them out on the week of the Super Bowl, GNX is now expected to surge back up to the top of the charts 3 months after its release, and it will sell 247,000 copies in its 12th week of release, with 127 of them coming from CDs and vinyls that Kendrick was selling on his website. Why this is substantial is because in Kendrick's 12th week, he's selling 247,000 copies. That's likely to be a lot more than what Drake and Party Next Door are about to sell with their brand new album in its first week. By the time I get this video out, the sales predictions will probably be out for the Drake and Party Next Door album, but I'm going to predict here. I promise I'm not altering this. This is just me guessing based off, data, comparing, streaming numbers of Drake's previous albums, comparing how other albums have sold. I have this knack for predicting numbers. I could be very off. This is literally me just going off the top of my head, but I don't see this Drake and Party album selling more than 210,000 copies in the first week. I'd say it's anywhere from 160 to 210. And this would mark Drake's lowest selling first week of all time. So if the first week predictions do come out as I'm editing this video, I'll throw in a little commentary right here. Oh, and a couple other things. Remember how I said that GNX was released in the middle of the day. So when you calculate its full first 24 hours plus the 7 hours of the first day that it was released, it actually racked up over 120 million streams in those 31 hours, with Drake and Party not even racking up half of that in their first 24 hours. They also ironically only had the second biggest debut for any album in 2025, and you know who had the first or the top debut? Ironically, it was The Weeknd, which we'll touch on shortly. But now, with these 56 million new streams that Drake racked up on the first day of this album release, plus his massive back catalog, which Larry Jackson has said earns more streams than the entire catalog of the 60s, 70s, and 80s music combined, it was only logical that on that first day of release, Drake would be the most streamed rapper of that day on Spotify. And of course, all the OV hoes had a field day with this because he beat Kendrick out by 0.1 million of a stream, so 100,000 streams, setting the record for the biggest streaming day for a rapper on Spotify in 2025 with 92.4 million streams as a lead artist on February 14th, and this breaks Kendrick's previous record of 92.3 million streams achieved on February 12th. And you know, before we get into all the OVHO conspiracies, first of all, him having the biggest streaming day for a rapper in 2025, doesn't that kind of prove that, you know, his whole defamation lawsuit can go down the trash? Because yes, Not Like Us did some damage to his reputation, but obviously didn't destroy him from still releasing successful projects. Well, aside from that, him and Party Next Door's face were plastered all over the massive streaming services, him being on Today's Hits playlist on Apple Music, Rap Life on Apple Music, Rap Caviar on Spotify, and New Music Friday on Spotify. And someone pointed out that why would this R&B album be in the Rap Caviar playlist? There's 2 rap songs on this 21-song project. Well, whatever, and we're going in day-by-day order, right? So in that first day that this new album was released, and Drake set the record for the most amount of streams for a rapper in 2025 in a single day, OVHOs were having a field day with one of them tweeting out, Kendrick won the beef, but that being said, he made 3 of the most brutal diss songs of all time, one of them being the biggest song of 2024, did a music video, dropped a surprise album, won 5 Grammys and a halftime show to get 92 million streams in one day, just to be dismantled in one day by Drake. Effing crazy. Well, have your laugh, OVHO, cause it didn't last long, but in the meantime, The Weeknd had to get a little sneak diss in and a little laugh at the fact that his new album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, remained the biggest debut on the global Spotify charts for 2025, still beating out Drake and Party Next Door, his Canadian counterparts. On a side note, that Weeknd album is phenomenal. You guys should definitely check it out. If you want real vocals, real hooks, real harmonizing, real Canadian R&B, go listen to that. Some more OVHO celebrations. Drake became the artist with the biggest first day Apple streams for an album in the following genres: rap, R&B, and dance. So yeah, that defamation lawsuit, not looking too pretty right now, right? And on a side note, while this new album came out, it did make its own splash on the charts. Kendrick still occupied the entire top 4 spots on the US Spotify charts for 5 days in a row. With Luther number 1, Not Like Us at number 2, TV Off at 3, and All the Stars at 4, he blocked out any of the Drake and Party songs from hitting those top 4 spots on the Spotify US charts. Not Like Us also remained at number 1 on global Apple Music, blocking out any of the new Drake and Party songs, with 85 days at number 1 on that chart. That's the longest running song at number 1 in the entire 2020s decade. On a side note, obviously, you know, the numbers aren't what's most important, but it's very substantial when you actually look at it from the perspective of what we've been getting for the last 10 years, right? Like, who's been number 1 the longest? Drake. What type of music has he been putting out that's been hitting the top of the charts? Pop music, some pop, R&B, hip-hop, fusion music. None of his timestamp records have hit number 1. It's not real lyricism hitting the top of the charts. And then other than Drake, you have guys like Travis Scott, Future, Young Thug, Migos. They're all great in their own rights. Those are the ones who have been dominating the charts over the last 10 years. And they've been doing so with melodic trap music. So to see this shift, right? To see artists like Kendrick, Doechii, Tyler the Creator, even Jid having a massive hit last year, which was predominantly straight rap. It's good to see that that's a direction that the mainstream is pivoting in, that that's the type of music that the mainstream is rewarding. And I'm documenting it to essentially say that, you know, we're in this resurgence or this renaissance creatively within the culture. And again, to disprove the whole, you know, being blackballed thing and the whole, you know, argument in his defamation lawsuit that the streaming companies are teaming up with Kendrick or UMG to suppress Drake's music and damage his reputation, Apple Music literally tweeted out after his new album came out saying, This album is breaking records. On Valentine's Day, the project became the biggest R&B album in Apple Music history by first day streams. Run it back now with a link to the album. So to all the OV hoes trying to run off with this narrative that these streaming companies are blackballing Drake, they're literally sharing his music. Also, if you count all the songs that Drake is featured on, he actually got substantially more than 92.4 million streams in a single day. He got 100 million plus streams in a single day and became the first artist to do so, first rapper to do so on Spotify in 2025. The last rapper to achieve this was also Drake in October of 2023. He's the numbers guy, man. He's the numbers guy. So that's why it makes it even more substantial when you see Kendrick's music that's not designed for the charts, blocking Drake from hitting those number one positions. And Hip Hop All Day clears up that 100 plus million number was his total streams including features. The 92.4 number reported earlier from chart data was lead streams only, meaning songs that Drake was the lead artist on. But just a day after all these OVHO celebrations with Drake being the number one most streamed rapper in a single day on Spotify, on the second day of Drake's album's release, Kendrick dethroned him once again, returning to being the most streamed rapper globally on Spotify, dethroning Drake after only one day. And in the replies of this tweet, someone pointed out saying Spotify is forcing Kendrick songs on us. Why the F is he appearing in Drake's search results? Because when you search up Drake, you might find Not Like Us. Again, more conspiracies from the OV hosts, the courthouse Karen conspiracies, but Hip Hop All Day cleared it up, saying Not Like Us pops up when you search Drake's name because Kendrick name drops Drake in Not Like Us, saying, hey Drake, I hear you like him young. It's lyric-based search algorithm. You can search I don't know if that's how you pronounce that. My apologies if it's not. You can search that name up on Spotify, and Central C will also pop up because Central C dropped a song name-dropping him. You can search Kendrick, and Family Matters will pop up as well. Meaning they're putting tracks in the name that you search up based off the lyrics in that song. So when you search up Drake, they're giving you Not Like Us because Kendrick raps, hey Drake, I hear you like him young. And despite Drake dropping 21 new songs this week, which on a side note, again, he had a very low first day streaming number with only 56 million streams for such a long album as well. Usually the longer the album, the more streams it gets, right? Kendrick got 126 million streams in its first 31 hours with GNX. That was only a 12-track album. This is a 21-song album. And despite it having 21 songs, it's not actually going to be Drake and Party Next Door battling Kendrick for the number one spot on the Billboard charts in 2 weeks from now. It's actually going to be Kendrick battling with himself, because on this week's Billboard chart, Not Like Us is suspected to hit number one thanks to a boost from the Super Bowl. And next week, Luther is actually pacing to dethrone Not Like Us, hitting a new peak of number one on the Billboard charts, becoming the second song from GNX to hit number one on the Billboard chart. And this would also make Kendrick the first rapper in history to have 4 number one Billboard hits in 12 months, because like that with Future and Metro Boomin came out less than 12 months ago. That hit number one. Then Not Like Us hit number one. Then Squabble Up hit number one when GNX was released. And now Luther, in less than 12 months, would give Kendrick his 4th number one hit. Also, some more poetic justice. Remember when Drake rapped on Push Up saying, "Get more love in the city that you're from"? Well, funny enough, after just one day of release, Kendrick and SZA dethroned Drake and Party Next Door, with Luther and Not Like Us surging up to the 1 and 2 spots on the Canadian Spotify chart, replacing CN Tower and Give Me a Hug. Kendrick also occupies 4 out of the 5 spots on the top 5 Spotify Canadian charts on the second day that Drake released this new album. For those of you who don't really keep up with the charts and stuff, this is very substantial when you compare it to prior Drake numbers. The fact that Kendrick's blocking him in his own hometown, in his own city, in my city, it makes me proud, to say the least. I'm happy for hip hop. At the same time, Kendrick is slowly creeping up towards becoming the first rapper to have 100 million monthly listeners on Spotify in history, as he just reached a new peak of 98.7 million monthly listeners, extending his record as the rapper with the most monthly listeners in Spotify history. And people have noted that for the first time ever in Drake's career, his streaming numbers have always been so strong. He's never had to sell a vinyl, he's never had to sell a CD, and he's still the highest selling rapper. Well, I guess in an attempt to, not flop, they started actually selling digital and physical copies of this new album on Drake's website, because just to break down the numbers for you guys, 1,500 streams equals one album sale. So if an artist actually sells the full album on their website, all you have to do is buy it, and that counts as one album sale. It's a lot easier to rack up sales like that versus, actually going and streaming the song 1,500 times. It's almost a cheat code, right? Because no one's actually taking a CD, popping it into a CD player and playing it like that. They're buying it like that to support the artist, because obviously buying the actual CD in full is going to help their sales out a lot more than just going and streaming it, because they would need 1,500 streams for just one sale. So fans noticed that Drake was actually selling his album for $7.99 on his website, and I guess due to the low sales, he actually marked it down to $4.99 just a day later. On a side note, again, Drake hasn't sold a vinyl or a CD since, if you're reading this is too late, maybe even before that. That was 10 years ago, so it'll be interesting to see how he does in the physical sales realm, because we know Taylor Swift, she used to be a huge behemoth in terms of selling actual physical copies of her albums. She had somewhat of a hard time adjusting to streaming. Now she's like the biggest streaming artist ever. Drake was the opposite. He was always doing very well streaming, but no one ever actually went and bought copies of his album, mainly because he didn't sell them on his website. Now he's selling them, so it'll be interesting to see how that actually translates, if his fans are actually loyal enough to go buy it, or if they just play it over and over again on streaming platforms because, it's very easily digestible, recyclable music. That's why you see like Travis Scott, for example, have these massive numbers, because he's always bundling his albums with like t-shirts and stuff. Like if you buy a t-shirt, you get a copy of the album. That counts as one album sale. So his album numbers always look crazy. Some people view that as a cheat code. To Drake's credit, he's never played that game and still been, the highest selling rapper from an album's perspective. I guess he figured it's finally time to play the game. And this guy had a funny comment, a very true comment as well, saying, I never thought I'd see the day where Kendrick is outstreaming Drake the day after he released a 21-song album, but here we are. And don't forget also, Kendrick's doing this off the strength of Not Like Us, which was released almost over a year ago at this point, and GNX, which was released 12 weeks ago. And then the second day numbers come in for the Drake and Party album, and they took a massive slump from that first day, earning just 33.6 million streams in their second day. Again, they earned about 56.2 million streams in the first day, so almost a 40% drop off. People are gravitating towards Nokia and Give Me a Hug. Those saw either an increase in streams or just stayed flat. All the other songs dropped off massively, and I mean, this makes sense, right? On that first day, everyone's excited, everyone goes and checks it out, but like Drake has said in his own music, only real music's gonna last. All the other BS is here today and gone tomorrow. So that's pretty apparent here. And then you could see also that next week's Billboard Hot 100 chart, so not the one that's coming out on Tuesday, but the one that's coming out on the following Tuesday, Kendrick will replace himself. Luther will go number 1, and it'll dethrone Not Like Us, which will go at number 2. Then TV Off will still remain in the top 10 at number 4. Squabble Up at number 5. All the Stars will go all the way up to number 9, which is insane because that's a song from 2018. It hit its peak back in 2018 at number 7 on the Billboard charts. Now, 7 years later, it's climbing all the way back up to number 9 and charting higher than the highest charting song off this new Drake and Party album, which is expected to be Give Me a Hug, the Joe Budden diss, which will be at likely number 10 on next week's chart. So even 2 weeks after the Super Bowl, Kendrick is expected to have 4 songs out of the top 5 on the Hot 100, 5 songs in the top 10, and all of them being higher than the highest charting Drake song off his new album. And even in the second day of this album's release, Kendrick dethroned Drake again for being the most streamed rapper on Spotify with 79.3 million streams, while Drake only had 72.5 million streams, even though he just dropped a 21-song album 2 days ago. Squabble Up also squabbled all the Drake and Party songs out of the top 5 of the US Spotify chart on that album's second day of release, as Kendrick occupied the entire top 5 of the US Spotify charts over a week after the Super Bowl performance, over 3 months after GNX was released, over 7 years after All the Stars was released, All these songs are still in the top 5 of the US Spotify charts today, which is absolutely insane. Drake and Party's Sexy Sleepy songs had an even lower dip in the US than they did on the overall global Spotify charts, seeing a 44.1 decrease in streams in their second day. Their first day, they clocked in 28.8 million streams. Their second day, only 16.1 million streams. And not one song off that 21-song album is doing above 1.4 million streams at this point in the US. Kendrick has over 4 songs doing that. So, smoking on your top 5 tonight, today, always. And here come the OVHO Courthouse Karen conspiracy theorists, because the OVHO tweeted out saying, Drake is aware of the suspicious activity on streaming platforms. He liked to post on Instagram of several fans highlighting unusual things they've experienced while streaming Sexy Sleepy songs for you. Keep supporting the album in all the ways made possible by OVO Sound. And he tweeted out a post from Akademiks, where Akademiks reported that when you search Kendrick on Spotify, GNX pops up. When you go ahead and search Drake and Party Next Door, their new album doesn't pop up. And Drake, of course, liked this post. Now, before we debunk that BS, just to give you guys a little glimpse of where we're at in hip-hop, these were Drake and Kendrick's top 3 most streamed songs on global Spotify on Saturday, September 15th. Not Like Us had 10 mil, Luther had 9.4, All the Stars had 6.7. Drake couldn't even clock 3 million streams on the biggest song off his new album in the second day of its release, while he's dissing Joe Budden and the entire rap game. Another W for Kendrick. He becomes the first rapper to earn over 1 billion streams as a lead artist in the US in 2025. Oh, and another post that Drake liked, which we already debunked, was a fan asking, why is Not Like Us up next when I was done listening to the Drake and Party album? Obviously, he's suggesting there's some grand conspiracy here with Apple Music, with all the streaming platforms trying to strangle the sensitive, spiraling, sexy red stunt double. But again, it's a lyric-based algorithm, right? If it says Drake in the lyrics of the song, they're going to suggest that song when you're listening to the artist named. And the conspiracy rabbit hole gets even deeper with the Courthouse Karens tweeting out an entire thread on why this is torturous interference and how this will win Drake his lawsuit against UMG. They're forgetting a key part of the lawsuit before we get into this whole thread, which is that Drake isn't only suing UMG for promoting Not Like Us in unethical tactics. The defamation case is about them publishing the song to begin with, which, if he wins, sets the precedent that artists can now be in danger depending on the lyrics they actually present in their music. This is not protecting artists, it's most definitely harming them. But anyways, let's jump into this thread just for the fun of it. So they're saying this new album isn't just a flop, it's looking like industry interference. Fans have reported that searching for the album on Spotify is weirdly difficult. If you can't find the music easily, you can't stream it. Simple as that. We're going to debunk that shortly. They continue. This is happening at the same time as Drake's legal battle with UMG and Spotify. He's accusing them of artificially inflating Kendrick's Not Like Us streams through bots and payola. Now his album isn't getting normal exposure. The timing is weird. First of all, Drake already dropped the petition with Spotify. It's just UMG, so they have nothing to do with this at this point. But the tweeter makes some interesting points. He says the industry has a long history of labels pushing certain artists while sidelining others. The question is, why would UMG and Spotify turn against Drake of all people? The answer likely lies in money, power, and control over the narrative. Legally, if a label or streaming service manipulates an artist's numbers or suppresses their work, this could be torturous interference, a serious claim. If Drake can prove that his label or Spotify intentionally hurt his album's reach, he might have a solid case. This isn't just about Drake, it's about the entire music industry and whether platforms and labels have the power to decide who succeeds and who disappears. When streaming numbers can be manipulated, is anyone's success even real? The situation with some sleepy sexy songs for you needs serious scrutiny. Whether you like Drake or not, this case could expose how labels and streaming giants really operate behind the scenes. If true, it's not just unethical, it is illegal. This is the biggest artist in the world facing what looks like an intentional blackout. Imagine what happens to smaller artists without the platform or resources to fight back. What do you think? Industry politics or something deeper? Drake is going to win this. Why? Because if UMG and Spotify manipulated his album's visibility, it's torturous interference, which courts have ruled against before. This isn't just music politics, it's a business sabotage case. Remember Jay-Z's Tidal versus Apple dispute? Apple allegedly tried to block 444's promotion due to competition. Legal threats forced Apple to back down. Drake's case is bigger. If he exposes label streaming collusion, it's a major industry scandal. UMG won't risk a full trial with this lawsuit. Discovery could expose internal emails proving album suppression, a PR disaster. Expect them to settle quickly, just like Kesha's lawsuit with Dr. Luke, where leaked documents shook the industry. Drake wins because the truth is bigger than him. If labels and streaming services can silence their biggest star, what happens to smaller artists? This case could set a legal precedent on platform neutrality. And that's exactly when UMG will fold. Basically, he's saying here, like, Spotify and UMG are colluding not only to, boost Not Like Us on streaming platforms, but also to suppress this new album. That's why the streams have been so low. You can't find it when you search up Drake or Party Next Door. Therefore, Drake has a strong case against UMG because obviously they're, suppressing him, trying to, bring him down, bring his reputation down, bring his numbers down so that they can negotiate a lower number when they re-up his contract. And that's torturous interference, similar to how they did Jay-Z when he tried to start his own streaming company. So when he put out his new album 444 on Apple Music, they tried to suppress it to show like, look, don't go starting your own company because you're still going to need us. And then Jay-Z ended up threatening legal action and they stopped doing this malpractice. They're claiming Drake is suffering a similar thing with Spotify purposely not showing users Drake's new album, which will then hinder his sales numbers. Again, we're going to debunk that. We already somewhat did, right? Drake's face, Party's face were plastered not only on the R&B playlist, but also on the rap playlist. They were all over the Spotify and Apple Music homepages. I checked, they were there. Apple Music literally tweeted out that Drake and Party broke all these records with their R&B album and to go check it out, even tweeting out a link to the album. Before we debunk that even further though, I just thought this was funny. Party Next Door, I guess, spoke on the criticism of the album, sharing, posting, and deleting a thing on his IG story saying, "It's an album to have sex to, not sit down and analyze, my guy. Go get some girls." And maybe he was talking to me because I just dropped a 45-minute review of the project and kind of analyzing where Drake really lost me, because I was a big fan of him like back in the day. The If You're Reading This It's Too Late, Nothing Was the Same days. You guys can go check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. But Party here is basically saying, stop saying Drake fell off and just go have sex with this new album, this AI R&B. And before we continue on Drake and Party, Kendrick broke more records. GNX officially returns to #1 on the Billboard 200 chart. Following the Super Bowl, it marks his second week at #1 and his biggest sales week since the release 12 weeks ago. And some more OVO conspiracies. This one I can't disprove, so, maybe they have a point here. I'll always be fair. They're showing that Kendrick's Not Like Us is featured in 5,233 playlists on Spotify, and 105 of them are botted playlists. I'm not really sure what botted playlist means per se. I guess a bot created it, or there's, bot followers, like the user that created the playlist or the ones that are actually following the playlists are bot accounts. If you guys could clear that up in the comments, that'd be great. They also say Luther by Kendrick and SZA is featured in 1,784 playlists, and 35 of them are botted playlists. And then they show that Drake's Nokia song is featured in 58 playlists, with 0 of them being botted. I'm just here to deliver the info. To me, 100 botted playlists out of 5,000 wouldn't really make that substantial of a difference. 35 botted playlists out of 1,700 playlists doesn't really make that much of a difference, but I don't like botted playlists to begin with, so if this is true, it's a little fishy. Maybe someone could clear that up in the comments. Anyways, we'll continue on. Kendrick breaks more records, becoming the first rapper in history to simultaneously chart 3 albums in the top 10 of the Billboard 200 chart. He's got GNX at #1, then Good Kid, Mad City, and Damn, 7 and 12 years after their initial release, back in the top 10 of the Billboard 200 chart. Also, Money Trees, thanks to the resurgence it had from the Super Bowl, is now predicted to enter the Billboard Hot 100 chart for the first time in history this week. The song has already sold over 10 million units in the United States, and this is its first time making it onto the charts, which showed that, this was a cult classic, but the hype from the Super Bowl drew so many new eyeballs on this song, on Kendrick's music in general, that it surged it back up onto the charts for the first time in history. And on a side note, that's a crazy thing about the streaming world, in the fact that this song could rack up so many streams that it now has sold over 10 million units. It went diamond, but it has never even charted on the Billboard charts because it's just slowly getting more and more streams over the weeks, over the last 12 years. Like, Not enough streams per week that it's ever actually entered the charts, but enough streams every single day that slowly and surely it racked up over 10 million sales. Same thing with All the Stars. It hit a peak 7 years ago at number 7 on the Billboard charts. It's about to almost beat that 7 years later, hitting number 9 on this week's chart. And now we get to disproving all the OVHO conspiracies. When you look up Drake, his new album is the first album you see on the search results when you look up his name. You don't even have to click his profile. This guy, Spectre, also showed that his face is all over all the rap and R&B playlists with this new album. Now, I use Apple Music, and I could definitely tell you that his face was also plastered all over the playlist, all over the homepage on Apple Music. And I made a Spotify account, so you'll see later in this video that you definitely can see his album. It's very visible when you look up his name. But on a side note, Kendrick breaks another record, becoming one of the first artists in history to have 3 albums charting simultaneously inside the top 10 of the Billboard 200 albums chart. You had Taylor Swift doing that 22 times, Herb Alpert, Peter, Paul and Mary, the Beatles, Whitney Houston, Prince, Led Zeppelin, and now Kendrick Lamar. He's in pretty good company there. And you could see that his album Good Kid, Mad City returns to the top 10 on this week's Billboard chart following the Super Bowl. It earns its first week in the top 10 since November 2012, over 15 years ago, up 71% in sales. Sorry, over 14 years ago, not 15 years ago. But Damn as well also returns to the top 10 following the Super Bowl, marking its first time in the top 10 of the album sales chart since March of 2018, up 93% in sales this week. You can also see these albums have sold like crazy, with Good Kid, Mad City almost at diamond status, selling 9.3 million units in the United States since its release in 2012, and Damn selling 8.9 million units since its release back in 2017. These are legendary numbers, so to anyone who says, people don't bump Kendrick outside, show them these stats. Numbers do not lie. GNX has also sold 1.4 million copies since its release just 3 months ago. And Kendrick breaks another record to become the first artist to spend time at number 1 on the Billboard 200 in both the 2024 and 2025 Billboard calendar years. Now, to end this video off, let's, break all these OVHO courthouse Karen conspiracy theories. I made a Spotify account. You look up the name Drake, the first thing you see is some sexy, sleepy songs for you. And there's even a playlist with all the songs from the new album. Hip Hop All Day also ran a poll asking, does Drake's new album show up when you search his name on the platform? 69% of voters voted yes, 31% of voters voted no. So it seems like the search results are somewhat skewed, but more in the favor of the album actually showing up when you search Drake's name. So I tried it out with Party Next Door 2. All you got to do is type in Party. The first thing you see, the second thing you see is Party Next Door. Then the third thing you see is his new album with Drake. Then when you search up Party N, you see Party Next Door as the first result, and then the new album with Drake as the second result. And literally, if you wanted any more proof that they're definitely pushing this album, the second you type in D on Spotify, just the letter D, the first thing you see is Drake. The second thing you see is Party Next Door, because they just put out an album together. And when you type in DR, you see Drake, then you see his new album, then you see his new song off that album, Give Me a Hug, then you see Party Next Door. So I think that's enough of a push, right? When you're literally just typing in the numbers DR and all you see is Party Next Door, Drake, their new album, their new songs. How much more of a push can you expect? You can't make all the excuses in the world if this album isn't selling as much as his old albums are. Sometimes you just gotta chalk it up to the music not hitting the same. And another record that Kendrick broke, just as Drake announced that he'd be doing all 3 days, headlining all 3 days at the UK Wireless Festival this summer, which we definitely got to give Drake credit. That's absolutely legendary. For one artist to headline an entire 3-day festival with different performances each time. One night he's doing with Party Next Door, the next night he's doing Drake and Friends, and then the third night it's him and Burna Boy. Again, going back to that defamation lawsuit, yeah, his reputation might have been stained, but it wasn't irreparable damage. But funny enough, as Drake announces this legendary UK festival, Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us aims for number 1 on the UK singles chart for the first time. It would mark his first ever number 1 in UK history. Talk about some poetic justice, no pun intended, and we'll cap this video off with some even more poetic justice, because Kendrick started this whole beef off rapping Prince outlived Michael Jackson. Now, 12 months later, he breaks the record for being the first artist with 3 albums simultaneously in the top 10 of the Billboard 200 chart, And the only male artists to simultaneously chart multiple albums in the top 10 on Billboard 200 this century are Prince in 2016 and Kendrick Lamar in 2025. Prince really did outlive Mike Jack in this beef. Oh, and some even more poetic justice. After the Taylor-made freestyle, after throwing Taylor Swift's name in this beef, after she danced as Kendrick Lamar received a Grammy to Not Like Us, chanting A minor, if you want to count both male and female artists who have simultaneously charted multiple albums in the top 10 on Billboard 200 this century, you got both Prince, Kendrick, and of course, Taylor Swift. So that's Kendrick's competition right now. Prince and Taylor Swift. While the OVHO Courthouse Karen conspiracy theorists are making up every excuse in the book why some sexy sleepy songs for you are flopping, Kendrick is breaking records left and right on the charts, playing Drake's game better than him with authentic, real rap. Let me know what you OVHOs think, and I will catch you guys in the next one.